Happy New Year, everyone. I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, we are going to celebrate the new year by discussing New Year's resolutions for the USMNT, or at least what we think they should be. To help me do that, I've invited Kyle Bond to join the show. Kyle is a writer for the Sporting News and has over a decade of experience covering the sport of soccer globally. He also does TV broadcasts for Wake Forest Soccer. Kyle, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, happy to be back. Should be a really, really fun and exciting year, I think, for U.S. national team fans. Lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to 2024 ever since this Copa America, kind of got announced as like the big event. So it's going to be a really exciting year. And let's get started with these New Year's resolutions. I'd love to just start by hearing what you think the USMNT's top resolution should be for 2024.
Yeah, I think the top resolution is how simple and easy do we want to make this? But I think the top resolution is win games, and by that, it sounds really silly, but by that I mean a few things. First off, I think we talk so much about building to this, building to that, experimenting with this. What's the goal? It's just that simple for this next cycle. It's just that simple. They have to win games. They're building up to this. We talk about, well, what did we learn from this game? Or does the scoreline really matter in terms of the result, or is it the performance that matters, yada, yada. That's all out the window for 2024. Results are most important for Copa America. And it's going to be like that in 2026 as well. So this is where it starts. And the team has to win games. There's no more talk about, well, the performance was good, so that's a great sign moving forward. None of that anymore. It's about the result. I don't care how you do it, win games. And so there will be a little bit of a mindset shift in 2024 because we are used to talking about, okay, what did we learn from this game? Where are the players at? What's the growth potential? That kind of a thing. Looking ahead. We're not looking ahead anymore. 2024 is about now.
Yeah, you do get the feeling that all of this talk about them being a young team. There's always this asterisk of like, well, this and that, this happened, but they're this young team. We got to be patient. I don't think anybody has the patience for that anymore, or that asterisk exists. Now it's like, okay, we're done with that. This team has to get results. Let me ask you, do you think it's, in terms of these results that they need, is it all about the Copa America and the results that they achieved there? Is that going to define the entire year, do you think?
It will, yeah, 100%. And the reason I say that is because you got to get used to that. That's how the World Cup works. And in 2026, that is all that matters. That is all that matters. It's here in the United States. It's the biggest tournament ever for this national team. Let's get used to it. Let's get used to one tournament, 3 games, 5 games, whatever it is, defining your year. That's the pressure you've got to get used to, and that's the pressure that fans and players need to embrace, because right now, that's how it's going to be. In 2026, that's how it's really going to be. So let's get used to it now. 2024 will be defined by their performance in the Copa America. That's the nature of international football. Is it fair? Probably not, because that's not how sports works, right? But it is how this works, and they better get used to it.
So since we're talking about resolutions, we're talking about goals, I'd like to get your thoughts on what you think the goal or resolution should be in terms of those, results. This is something I think about. I'm always thinking about the USMNT. I'm out on a walk. I'm thinking about, okay, what defines success for like their Copa America? And I go back, I go back and forth on different outcomes and what they mean. What do you think is a result or an outcome that they should be striving for?
Semifinals of the Copa America, I think, is a realistic and reasonable goal. I think a lot of people have said that. I'm not remotely close to the first, but I think it's the right goal. It's impressive, but it's not overreaching. They should win their group. I could see Uruguay winning that group. That's okay, but you've got to advance. And the reason I say that's okay is because you're matched up with Brazil's group. I think it's Group D in the first round of the knockout stage, and I'm not convinced that Brazil will win that group, and so I don't want to look too far ahead for knockout matchups because it's very likely that Brazil could finish second in that group. Brazil could finish first in that group. Who the heck knows? They're not playing well right now. They're beatable. So regardless of whether you get Brazil in the first round of the knockout or the semifinals, quarterfinals or semifinals, I think winning one knockout stage game is reasonable. If you draw them in the quarters, beat them. Others have. Plenty of other teams have in the past few months. Beat them. Maybe they'll have Carlo Ancelotti, as manager by then, and that would be tough. But they're beatable. So if you draw them, beat them. I don't think that the semis is unreasonable. And so I think that's where they should, regardless of how things shake out.
Yeah. It does feel like anything less than the semifinals would be a big disappointment. Regardless of, who they play, it just wouldn't feel good. If they make it to a final, I'd be thrilled. I mean, I'd be ecstatic. Semifinals is kind of like the expectation. But I also really think that Uruguay game is really important. I'm so excited to see them. I hope the group is on the line, when they play, so that it's a meaningful game. I mean, Uruguay doesn't have the glamour of the Brazil and the Argentina, but they're a great team, and I think probably on a neutral field,
they're better than Brazil.
Yeah. They are, and they're also a team that I would think the U.S. they're going to have a really hard time beating, and I think Uruguay would be favored definitely on a neutral field. So that, if for some reason, they beat Uruguay, win the group, end up facing like Brazil in the quarterfinals, like you said, if Brazil finishes second in their group and they lose, I mean, I'll be disappointed, but I'll have some satisfaction that they beat a great team, in Uruguay. But
the group stage draw for the U.S. in the Copa America, I personally could not have gone better because
absolutely
you have two games against teams that you will be expected to beat, but that, I mean, first of all South American competition is tough. There's no easy win in this tournament. Not a single one. Even Jamaica is a pain in the ass. Like the bottom tier teams in CONMEBOL are tough. So you've got two games against teams that you'll be expected to win, but will be tough. And then you've got what you hope will be a generally meaningless game against Uruguay if you take care of business, against a team where there will be competitive stakes. They'll want to win the group, but hopefully by that point they've got qualification wrapped up. So you could be looking at a game against Uruguay with some tangible competitive stakes, but really nothing to lose in a true test, right? Where do we stack up against one of the world's best teams with very little to lose, hopefully, if they've taken care of business? And then you get the knockout stage. It's just the way this, and then you're on the side of Brazil, who's maybe the most beatable they've ever been. So like the way this draw worked out for the U.S. is so perfect. They just have to now do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing about the draw, they miss Argentina, no matter what until the final, if they could make it. So I absolutely agree with you. That Uruguay game. The other thing I'm excited about is it's going to be in Arrowhead Stadium. I'm from Kansas City, so I have a lot of memories of being in Arrowhead, and to see the U.S. play such a big game in Arrowhead's going to be incredible.
That'll be a fun place too, because the U.S. just doesn't really play in the Midwest much, except for in Kansas City. So that place really does get up. They've shown up before for the national team. That'll be fun. And then you talk about backyards. The semifinal they could potentially play in is here in our backyard in Charlotte. So, nice. if they make it through that quarterfinal game and get to the semis, that'll be. I've hammered for years that Charlotte is an underrated soccer town here in the U.S. They just really show up. The Latino community is rambunctious. They come out every time for like the other CONCACAF teams. It's just a fun atmosphere. And so I think that would be really, really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to believe we're about 6 months away, something like that. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Let's talk about a few other areas where we're hoping to see some resolutions. I'm just gonna throw out a few kind of areas at you to kind of get your take on it. The first one is positions. So when you think about the starting 11, for the USMNT. Is there a position right now that you think is a little bit unsettled? Maybe there's, 3, 4, 5 guys in the picture. Is there a position where you'd like to see more get cleared up, in 2024?
The top of my list there, and if you had told me this 6 months ago, I would have laughed in your face, but the Tyler Adams injury really has the midfield completely up in the air. I think Tyler Adams has to win his spot back because you've got 4 guys, realistically, for 3 spots. You have Weston McKennie. You have Gio Reyna, who is now firmly in the mix there for the midfield. And you've got Yunus Musa. So I think Tyler Adams has to come back and win his spot back. I think he can. I think he's vitally important to this team, whether he's starting or on the bench. He's a huge part of the squad. And you never expect the midfield to be fully healthy with the way that those guys have had history. But if those 4 guys are healthy, I don't know if Tyler Adams is a starter right now at this moment. So I think that's the position that will have the most uncertainty going into the Copa America, just based on health, just based on form. Who knows? It's hard to predict. The other spot I think there's a lot of questions about is center back. We had a clear hierarchy going into the World Cup before the injury to Miles Robinson. And then Miles Robinson went down and there was a little more uncertainty, and I don't think that's really truly been resolved. I don't think Miles is a starter anymore. I think he's in the mix. I think he'll be in the squad, but I don't know if he's a starter anymore. I think Cameron Carter-Vickers has really come out of nowhere and become a firm starter. Tim Ream continues to hang around. A lot of questions there at center back. Chris Richards not getting club time, but everybody loves him for good reason. And now starting to get club time. So a lot of questions there. And I'm interested to see how that plays out. I don't think either one is a problem that they are uncertain. I think they're both uncertain in good ways, but I do think they're uncertain.
Yeah, that center back battle is one I watch every window, when the roster comes out and then when the starting lineups come out, because it does appear to be, I would say there's maybe 4 or 5 guys that you could say could be starting and have, started different matches over the past year. And you keep thinking that Ream is not going to be the guy, but no one's taken it from him yet. And so that's what I would like to see. I would love to see like a Chris Richards, Cameron Carter-Vickers, guys, whoever it is, come in there and really take, the position and, put their stamp on it.
I think one more too that we would be remiss to not mention is goalkeeper. I think a couple of questions there. Matt Turner's still the starter, but he's struggling a bit at Nottingham Forest right now. Form is temporary. I could see him being fine by the time March and April roll around. He had a great game last time out as of recording this. They won. Who did they beat? He made a bunch of good saves in their last game.
Oh, yesterday? Wasn't it
yes.
Newcastle?
Yes, that's exactly what it was. He played really, really well in that game. But the last couple were shaky, and he's had questions on the ball. His possessional play hasn't been very good, but it's good to see him getting back, playing well. He made 5 saves, which was really good in that game last time out. So hopefully he can maintain that. But then you look at who's the backup. I think I came on this podcast a few months ago and said there was a roster that they released. Maybe it was the November roster where. Or maybe it was the October roster. I'm trying to remember. It was one of the two where Greg Berhalter only included 2 goalkeepers.
Yeah,
and to me,
you were on the show when we talked about that. I do remember.
Yeah,
that.
To me, it was a signal that he said I could pick 3, but I don't have 3. I don't even have 2. He has to include 2 for practical purposes. But there's really nobody that's taken hold of the backup spot. We haven't heard from Zach Steffen because his club situation has been a mess, but hopefully it sounds like that will be resolved soon. Somebody's got to step up and take the backup spot because I think Matt Turner needs that pressure.
Yeah, hopefully Ethan Horvath and Zach Steffen can get their club situations, settled out soon. Speaking of, backups and depth charts, let's talk about depth in 2024. What is a position that you hope the USMNT gets more depth at in 2024?
That's a great question. All of them. I mean, depth is so valuable, right? I think in baseball, the old adage is you can't have too many starting pitchers. I feel that way in this sport because with more and more and more and more and more and more and more fixtures every year, every month, every week, depth is becoming more and more important. And every time you think they have it, you're reminded that they don't. And that's the case for every country. I mean, you look at Argentina. Yeah, they've got amazing depth, but they lose a guy like Lisandro Martinez, and now you're relying on Nicholas Otamendi for another year or two, right? Like it's just every country has its depth problems. So this is not a bad thing, but you are reminded that every position. But I think fullback, and I think that's the position that everybody wants depth at and doesn't have, because it's the position to me where the gap between the starter and the backup is the largest. You saw Serginho Dest go, have trouble with his discipline, and Joe Scally's been okay, but still hasn't really proven that he can challenge Dest on the international level. He hasn't had that performance where you go, "Ooh, all right, this is a war now." Anthony Robinson is maybe, you could make a concrete argument, I don't know if I would, but I'd be close, that Anthony Robinson is the most important player on this team. Because the gap between him and what's left is so massive. I saw this today. I was doing research for some betting content in the Premier League. Anthony Robinson has attempted the most duels of any defender in the Premier League. He's a one-on-one machine, and yet he's still scoring and assisting goals and contributing in the attacking third. The guy does it all. It's shocking to me that he hasn't been scooped up by a bigger club yet, because Fulham have resisted because they don't have anybody. They want depth. They need fullback depth because he's so important to that team. So I think fullback on both sides, but particularly behind Anthony, is probably the most vital right now.
Yeah. Yeah, in the last episode, we did a year-end stock up, stock down, and spent quite a bit of time talking about Anthony Robinson being one of the biggest stock ups of the year. And we also spent quite a bit of time talking about Joe Scally. And just like you said there, I do think he's solidified his position, as kind of the number 3 fullback. But we're yet to see him really do anything of significance in a game, where he has some kind of moment where you're like, okay, this guy can do something great. So, yeah, there's Dest problems, so we have Anthony Robinson, Serginho Dest, and you got to say Joe Scally probably has a pretty firm hold on the third one right now. I mean, do you have a favorite for who you think that fourth fullback is between Lunn, Maloney, Dwan Jones, one of those guys? Who do you think's the favorite?
My gut wants to say TBD. I would say Lund probably, has the in, just because he's playing well. He is in a lower league, so it's tough to anoint him as the guy. But as a 21-year-old, there's a lot of potential there. I think, again, we've just talked about like how nobody's really stepping up quite there. I don't think Dwan Jones is a viable option. I think the U.S. has failed from a depth capacity if he's on the roster this summer. I think he's a good player. I don't see the ceiling there being what it needs to be for a guy in that spot. I think John Tolkien is probably in the mix, but I think he's in that Serginho Dest mold where you got to get better defensively. And I think the ceiling is there for a guy like him. So I would put Tolkien even above DeJuan Jones in the sense that I think for a fourth slot, you're looking for somebody who has more potential than current viability. And I think he would be that above Jones there.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see how we'll see what Berhalter gets going with those guys. And speaking of Greg Berhalter, he's the next guy I want to ask you about. Can you think of any specific resolutions Greg Berhalter should have other than the results that we've talked about? Is there any experiments you'd like to see him run, different formations, or anything different you'd like to see Greg Berhalter do in 2024?
I would say consistency would be the resolution for Berhalter. I think if I have a complaint about how Greg Berhalter has played in the past, it would be there's too much experimentation. And I think going into the next 3 years, with the importance of the competitions ahead, I think they have to build consistency. It's tough from a national team perspective more than the club perspective because with the way that fixture congestion is in the modern game, you want to use every opportunity to keep players fit, especially in games that don't matter from a competitive standpoint. You're trying to balance that with these opportunities to play together are so rare that it's so difficult to balance those two things. But I think even as you try to build depth, the starters have to play together every possible minute within reason, understanding that load is a concern. Injuries are a concern. You don't want to risk guys who are maybe, struggling with a knock. But every possible minute that he can find for the first choice 11 to play together, he's got to take them. And I think that will be a bit of a shift from his normal propensity to tinker.
Yeah. I've definitely seen him tinkering less in this,
yes.
Greg Berhalter 2.0. And you got to think up until the Copa America, there's not going to be much room to do any tinkering, whatsoever. Maybe afterwards that gives him another stretch to maybe experiment with some things. But yeah, I agree with you there. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for being on the show. I'll make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at The Bonfire, and also to your work at The Sporting News. Before I let you go, any other resolutions you think the USMNT should have, or some of their players should have, or is there just anything else you'd like to share?
I would say a resolution for fans and players alike. If you're listening to this, have fun. I mean, this is the most exciting time in the U.S. national team history. You have a Copa America hosted. You have a World Cup hosted in the coming years. You have the youngest, most talented squad in the history of this national team. I will continue to defend that. There are many different metrics you could use to make that claim, or fight against that claim if you disagree. But I think it is the squad with the most potential in U.S. national team history, and just have fun watching them ball. They are talented. They are fun. And I hope the players enjoy it too, because this is a special time to be part of this national team. And I think U.S. national team fans struggle with sitting back and having fun. And that's okay. Being a sports fan is hard, especially when there's high expectations. But just enjoy it. Whether they make the semis of the Copa America or not, they will perform. I have no doubt they will put on a solid display. Soccer results are fickle. I think they will come through, but whether they do or not, just enjoy it, because this is a fun time to be a U.S. national team fan. So that is your resolution for 2024. Have fun.
Oh man, that was perfect. You're right. And I need to take that to heart as well. My dog would like to see me have more fun because sometimes he gets a little scared when I get fired up during a USMNT game, and he has to take off and go sit in another room. Thank you so much, Kyle.
No problem. Anytime, man.
And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a fellow USMNT fan. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.